everyone! My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we are once again talking about one of everyone's favorite subjects, submissive training. Now, recently I did a video on position training, which if you have not seen that one yet, I definitely recommend you do. That will be linked down below. And in the past, I have also talked about things like good ideas for starting in DS, suggestions for getting into power exchange. And whenever I talk about something along those lines, I always get questions like, Evie, but can I do things like this if I am new to BDSM and don't have a partner? Or do I need a dom to train me before I can be a submissive? Or even things like, how can I get myself ready to be a submissive for a future relationship? And I think those are all really, really good questions. So we're going to go ahead and try to answer those today and teach you all how you can start along your journey of being a submissive without having to have a power exchange relationship. Now, one of the big misconceptions that I think a lot of newer S-types and frankly older S-types that have been doing this for longer as well fall for is the belief that in order to be a proper submissive, you have to be trained and broken in by another dominant first, who is not really your actual dom, but is just taking on a trainer role. And I know exactly where this idea comes from, because when I was first getting into BDSM and I was on FetLife and I was reading old blog articles, this is definitely an idea that gets disseminated, that in order to be a good, proper submissive, you have to be trained by someone else first that is a dom that will teach you how to be submissive just in general, as though there's only one way to be a submissive. And I remember being on FetLife and I would get messages from people that would be like, I'm a master, I have 25 years of experience, and I can teach you everything you need to know about how to be a submissive if you come over to my house on Wednesdays when I don't have the kids and clean my whole house from top to bottom in a latex maid outfit. How does that sound? And at the time, I didn't really know any better. I thought this was normal because everywhere was telling me this is the kind of thing I should be looking for. And I thought, you know what? Maybe that is a good idea. Never ended up happening, thankfully, but looking back on it, there were definitely some red flags in that scenario. Because while there can be platonic, training-oriented, or training-only BDSM relationships out there, they totally happen. By and large, the people that cold call you on FetLife, other social media, TikTok maybe, I don't know, they come up and tell you, hey, I'm gonna train you, I can totally do this. They probably don't actually have the skills or experience level they are claiming to have or would be useful for you as a submissive, because most of the time they're probably more looking for role play, maybe some kinky sex, without the actual commitment of a real power exchange dynamic. Because many people will say, oh, it's just training, it's not like a real power exchange relationship, as though that would absolve them of all of the typical dom-oriented duties. So if you're doing training, how do you learn how a dom should treat you if your trainer is saying they're a dom but not like a real dom, so they don't have to do XYZ thing? I don't know. It gets confusing, but that's the logic that people go along with when they are trying to sell you on the idea of like, oh, random stranger that I just messaged, like, you want to be my trainee submissive and do all this stuff for me? As you can tell, I have a little bit of a pet peeve in this area, because there is no one way to do BDSM. There's no one way to do DS relationships. So a training relationship is really just teaching you how to be submissive for that person, not every dom for all of time. Because I think what is more likely to happen is if you go through a training relationship like this and you go, I did a whole year with this master, I know how to do all these poses, I know how to do all this stuff, and then you find your actual real dom, they don't care about any of that stuff. They have totally different opinions, a totally different style, and so actually it can end up being more work to unlearn all of the one true way about how to do this one position, how to do this one skill stuff. And so you can actually end up making things harder for yourself getting into a later DS relationship, because you basically have to deprogram, declutter your brain of all of those things you learned from that original person. However, it's also not a complete one or the other scenario. It's not like you either have to go in as a blank slate or being fully trained by another dominant person. You can take in your own skills, your own experience, your own things that you wanted to learn for yourself. If you want to learn tea service because you think that sounds cool, you don't necessarily need to do that in a training relationship in order to learn how to do that. And so despite what some people on the internet might tell you, you are not tarnished if you come in already knowing things as a submissive, even if that knowledge doesn't come from another dom. I actually think that it is a good idea to do your own self-training, to do your own research, to get your own information, because that is going to be something that actually helps you figure out what kind of DS relationship you want to have. Because being a submissive, discovering your submissive self, is very much, at least in part, an introspective experience. What is it that you like about power exchange? Do you want to have a 1950s household? Do you want to have a leather MS dynamic? Do you want to be a 24/7 puppy? Those are all pretty different styles. Maybe you want to have a little bit of each at different times of the week. Who knows, right? And each one of those things have their own skills associated with them. Do you want to learn how to boot black? Do you want to learn how to mix simple drinks? Do you want to learn classic slave positions? And most of these things are not areas that you need someone else to be directly teaching you. They are things you can learn on your own, or just learn through other methods besides direct instruction from just a single dominant. Doing them on your own first also allows you the opportunity to see what is really going to work for you and what doesn't, without the fear of disappointing a partner or it not living up to your fantasy expectations. I really think this method of learning on your own first and doing some of your own training can actually be really helpful. So, now that we've established that self-training is a legitimate approach, how do you actually go about doing that? Again, I understand that one of the appeals of having a trainer is that they are going to be a single source for all of the information you supposedly need to learn, and that information is going to be the right information. By comparison, trying to do this on your own can seem pretty overwhelming. But I don't think it actually has to be that much harder. Thanks to things like the internet and public kink communities, accurate information from a diverse variety of sources is much more easily available than it used to be. So let me go ahead and give you all a list of some of my favorite ways to do self-directed training and learn some information on my own outside of a DS relationship. Number one would be dedicated kink education websites and podcasts. This would be things like Shibari Study or Crash Restraint or Remedial Ropes, What's the Safe Word, Kink Academy. There are a lot of options for this category. Number two would be online conferences and classes. Now, there are so many things I could recommend here. I'm just going to say to go to FetLife and look up virtual events and see what's on the calendar, see what you like the looks of. Personally, I like to keep track of things like Wicked Grounds and Tess events and Pragmatic Kink, or is it Pragmatically Kinking? One of those two ones. They have really regular classes from so many different presenters. Lee Harrington is somebody else that does a lot of online classes, especially as well, and they're one of my favorite things, honestly. And there's even online conferences now too, if you want to have a whole weekend of just taking classes. Number 3 would be BDSM books dedicated to a particular subject area. There is a whole set of little blue books that are called the Toy Bag Guide to, and they're a little bit dated, they're not always the best, but if you want a really concentrated way to learn about something like age play or caning, they have a lot of options out there for just quick little guides. There are also larger books such as Spanking for Lovers by Janet Hardy that are also a little bit harder to find compared to more general nonfiction books, but are totally worth it. Number 4 would be solo play or self-play in areas of interest. This could be things like deep throat training, or wearing butt plugs, or bondage, or chastity devices, or temperature play. Some things you can't necessarily do as solo play or self-play, like humiliation. I don't really think that you can fully achieve on your own, but there are lots and lots of different types of play that you can do just on yourself to get a taste for it before you start incorporating it into scenes with other people. Number 5 would be non-BDSM books focused on a particular skill. This could be massage techniques, or gardening, or household management, or cooking, or dog training. If it's something that you would maybe want to do, especially in a live-in DS relationship, vanilla resources are not actually a too bad place for that. Number 6 would be classes at a local community college or other training program. This could be things like sewing, knitting, secretarial skills, aesthetics, bartending. There are a lot of things they teach at community colleges that you might not necessarily expect them to. I have seen everything from intro to bonsais to tarot card reading, all kinds of physical fitness, yoga, organization stuff, business skills. There's a lot in there that you could actually learn and then apply to a BDSM relationship. So the next time, if you live near a community college and they mail you a booklet for the upcoming semester saying, hey, here's what we're offering in fall 2023, don't just put it in the recycling bin, maybe actually give it a read through first. Number 7 is self-guided practice and reflection. Always just be mindful throughout your day. Think about the ways you're doing things that you already do for yourself. How do you make your bed? How do you pack your lunch for the day? There are ways you can do that. They're kind of just like, oh yeah, throw it together, do whatever, get it done. And there are other ways you can do it that are more beautiful, more presentable. You can do it with a sort of a grace, more of a serenity to it. Think about how you would do it if a dom was asking you to do it. How would you make your lunch if you were making your dom's lunch instead? How would those things be different? You can also record yourself doing these things as well throughout your day and check how they look and see how maybe you would hold yourself differently. Check your posture and kind of just almost practice as though a dom is watching you, even when a dom really isn't watching you. That maybe sounds kind of creepy, but for some people it can actually be really motivating. Speaking of which, for number 8, my final suggestion, I would really recommend keeping a journal or having an accountability buddy, if you will, because I know for a lot of submissives, one of the main appeals of doing DS is having somebody there that can hold you accountable and keep your standards high because their standards are high. And when you don't have that supervision, it's harder to fall off the track and get distracted and not go for your goals. And keeping a journal can be a way to help hold yourself accountable if you are keeping track of your progress and being honest about if you're working towards certain things you want to work towards. And if you are already in the lifestyle, if you have friends that are submissive or have similar goals to you, you can do things with them. You can go to classes together, you can read the same books, and use that as a way to hold each other accountable and help you both work towards the things you want to work towards. Now, if you haven't gotten this sense from the list so far, let me make it clear. Basically, anything can be a trainable submissive skill. As I often say on this channel, it is about the intention and the mindset. There is not one definite categorization of like the 50 things you need to learn in order to be a certified true submissive. That's not a thing yet, and I'm thankful that it's probably not ever going to be. Because yes, sometimes being submissive will look like kneeling for hours in black lingerie. In other places and other times, it will look like learning how to make a really good cup of coffee, or fetching your partner their robe and slippers for them in the morning before they get out of bed. It's about finding what makes you feel submissive, what makes you feel connected in your DS relationship, not going off of some internet numbered list of like, oh, I need to do XYZ thing because all submissives do XYZ thing. No, this is a very personalized experience, and it's about finding what you enjoy, what you want your relationship to have. But with that being said though, all of the choices can make it pretty overwhelming to know where to start. So let's also do a list where I talk about some of the general categories for training and education that you might want to pursue. Number one would be what I would call traditional skills. This would be table service or place setting, tea service, boot blacking, preparing cigars, position training, things that we generally associate, especially with like the leather community or like the older like lifestyle side of the community. This would be what I would consider to be more traditional skills. Number two would be kink skills. To be things like pain tolerance, knowledge about different types and areas of BDSM, learning about the basics of bondage, safety information, learning what your aftercare needs are, just generally learning more about BDSM and how to do scenes. Number three would be housekeeping. Now this one is probably pretty self-explanatory, but just to give some examples, this could be things like doing the laundry, getting the dishes done, changing the linens on the bed, doing the vacuuming, any kind of general interior household maintenance. Even things like cooking or meal prepping could be part of this as well. And besides just housekeeping, there's also house maintenance, which is number 4 on our list. I think this gets stereotyped as being like the more masculine, like daddy way of taking care of a house, but I think you can do anything on this list, like literally this whole list, regardless of your gender. This would be things like mowing the lawn, raking the leaves, cleaning out the gutters, taking care of the car, maybe doing computer repair. If you have more skills like DIY stuff, maybe some basic plumbing, even chauffeuring as well, I think could potentially be under this category. And number 5 is personal assistance. This tends to be more business skills, more secretarial skills, things like taking dictation, returning phone calls and emails, keeping track of a schedule, maintaining a calendar, keeping track of appointments, getting reservations for dinner, running errands, maybe even keeping track of expenses, managing things like investments, maybe even doing more old-fashioned stuff like writing thank you letters. Number 6 would be body care. Yes, this could mean things like foot rubs or back massages, but it could also be things like beard maintenance, straight razor shaving, waxing, sugaring, hair trims, applying nail polish, figuring out someone's outfit for the day, putting perfume on them. It can be a lot of different things, so don't underestimate this category. And finally, number 7 I think is the most important and also the most overlooked, and that would be intrapersonal and interpersonal skills. Things like knowing your boundaries and limitations, journaling, meditation, learning heart-to-heart and non-violent communication methods, being assertive without being overly aggressive, and practicing self-management and self-awareness. Those things will take you so much farther in a DS relationship than memorizing 20 different slave positions. People don't want to hear that, but honestly, it's pretty dang true. Now, you may have noticed that a lot of the things on these lists have been more service oriented. And that is for the simple fact that I think a lot of the DS that is more associated with training tends to involve some level of service. But you don't have to identify as a service sub for these things to be useful to your journey or to be helpful in a BDSM relationship. Sometimes learning what you don't like is as important as learning what you do like. I know it can be really overwhelming to hear there is so much that you can do within BDSM, but don't worry, I think you're gonna have time to explore everything that you want to. What I would do is I would maybe choose 1 or 2 things to research every week and start learning about them, start practicing them if you can, depending on what it is, and just really see how it feels. And if that is engaging, keep going with it. And if it's not, drop it, move on. You don't have to stick with something just because you think, oh, well, I'm submissive, so I should learn how to boot black. You don't have to if you don't want to. It's okay to just move on. This is your time to learn about what you want to learn about. So don't waste it doing things you don't care about or don't fulfill you. Also, especially if you live in an area where the kink community is not really accessible, don't be afraid to look at vanilla resources. Even things like Leather Care have tons of options for just regular old vanilla books on Amazon, in your local library, that shouldn't raise any eyebrows. But with all that being said, I just want you all to remember that knowledge is power, even as a submissive. So don't be afraid to learn on your own and take charge of your own BDSM experience. Sadly, YouTube is not a big fan when I link to anything vaguely BDSM related in my description box, and they give me channel strikes for violating their nudity and sexuality policy, which I don't even necessarily know how that applies to educational text-only resources, but I like having a YouTube channel and I don't really want it to get deleted. So instead of linking to things I mentioned in this video directly, I'm going to be putting a link to my Patreon in there, which you can go to. I do have a master doc in there that is basically all of the various resources, websites, podcasts, books that I could find. Not necessarily personal recommendations, it's really more of a broad brush of what I would use to start researching. I can't endorse every single website, every single book on there, but it is a really good place to start. Now, if you did enjoy this video, if you want to make sure to not miss out on any of my other videos, if you have not already, please do subscribe because I make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related content. And finally, if you really want to support what I do, you can go over to my Patreon. I did already mention it before. It is going to be linked down below. If you do already support over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.